What are your thoughts on Wonder Egg Priority so far?
What are my thoughts on Wonder Egg Priority? My thoughts on Wonder Egg Priority is that I was very confused in the first episode, but out of everything I watched in the seasonal video so far, in the winter season so far, it's like stuck with me the longest. I've thought about it the most. Thank you very much for the sub, by the way. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Wonder Egg so far.
This show is very, very meaningful in its themes and the way that it likes to portray it.
What is it about?
That is, it's one of those shows where I'm just like, I don't even know what it's about. You know what I mean?
So, Wonder Egg Priority is kind of great. I don't mean to demean it or anything. It's a good show. It has fantastic visuals, high quality animation, and decent character writing. Were there some things I didn't like in the long run? Yeah, sure. Nonetheless, it's a great show focusing on the love and trauma within girls, exploring bizarre concepts and other serious themes. But is it something that can be compared to as Puella Magi America Magica and other magical girl genres? Or is it just another piping hot mess? In this video, I will be giving my thoughts on impressions and review 4 on the traumatic, strange, and wonderful Wonder Egg Priority. Now, before I begin, there are a few things I need to go over. Wonder Egg Priority is an anime original, meaning the studio created on its own with no prior source material from manga or any other adaptation. So don't expect me to discuss anything about the manga whatsoever. And it is written by Shinji Nojima, a screenwriter well known for his live-action screenplays such as Koko Kiyoshi, an LGBTQ+ series called Tatoebe Boku ga Shindara, a novel series called Sunusumumuri Kuno Koibito, all covering a range of LGBTQ+ issues and some taboo subjects. And the studio that produced this anime is Studio Cloverworks, which are well known for its works of Yakusoku no Neverland, Bunnyro Senpai, Horimiya, and Darling in the Franxx. Yes, the one with the horny girl. And I admit, I was skeptical about it at first, given Shinji Nojima had never written anything for anime originally. However, he has help from anime director Shin Wakabayashi, known for some of his episodes on Aka and an episode from Darling in the Franxx. So as long as someone from the anime industry is helping him, I think we're good. Anyways, we are introduced to Ai Oto, a 14-year-old girl who we find walking aimlessly around her neighborhood, praying to a bug. And it's calm, collective, and
What
is that? What the fuck is that?
okay, yeah, so
What the fuck?
and then again, it doesn't seem to waste any time to explain how the bug is, and she doesn't waste any time to figure out how the bug is talking to her. It just continues to go on. And I like it, because it appears that the writer knows that, yeah, everything seems strange. However, he doesn't let it waste time to continue the plot and the story to drive forward. And immediately after that, we know what I truly desires. That's what show don't tell comes into play. How show don't tell works is we essentially show the audience elements and they conclude things on their own. If heard, it takes a while to process, but shown, well, we just get it. Like Star Wars. We understand the Force because it is shown and told to us. We understand the Empire is evil because, well, we witnessed their savagery. We know hyperspace makes spaceships go really fast because we see it. And how do we know the Empire is truly evil, you may ask? And, well, there we have it. And from this concept, with very few scenes of introduction, we can understand other parts of Ai's character. We know Ai is a shut-in. We know she doesn't have any friends. and we know she hasn't been attending school for a pretty long time. And it also involves eggs to an extent. And the first thing that got my attention was not the weirdness, but like the animation and the audio mixing that came from the scene. The audio mixing felt really silent, cold, as if from a horror vibe, and the narrow hallways gives a sense of claustrophobia. Also in a sense that we're unsafe in a sense. And I guess you could say it takes from some movies like The Shining, in which most, if not the entire movie, just takes place in a hotel and takes advantage of the horror of loneliness and also being stuck with people that you have no idea who they are or what they can become.
Here's Johnny.
Before I can ask her any more questions,
Oh no! Anyway.
and they are horrifying, and they narrowly escape. The girl and I have a short conversation. What really stuck out to me when I says, I don't have any friends, I don't need them. And the girl talks about how she has many friends, but many superficial ones. And she goes on saying that I probably need a best friend, someone who can or she can talk to, or someone she can put her secrets and trust in someone. It's a short yet essential conversation that I feel may apply further as the story goes on. And it reminded me a bit about a theme that's really popular in many Maho shoujo series. The idea of friendship. That in many cases, friendship helps them overcome enemies, helps them overcome their problems. However, as it evolved, like in series in Puella Magi Madoka Magica, friendship can't always solve everything. Friendships can fail, friendships can break away, and also in the long run you might find yourselves not keeping up with them. However, as they evolved, it also shows that, or contextualize, that we can make friends, and yeah, our friends may not be perfect, but they're the only people that we can trust, and not just trust, but help grow with. She explores a little bit more until she finds something, and when she enters, she discovers something that she tried to hide away, to repress, something so traumatic to her that it just shut her down. The statue of her one and only friend.
永瀬小糸です。皆さん仲良くしてください。
じゃあ永瀬さんは大戸さんの隣の席に。
はい。
Koito is introduced as a friend to Ai, and I guess explains why Ai acts the way she does. We learn from Ai that Ai has a condition named heterochromium, a condition in which the eye color from each eye is different and leads her to be bullied. And worse, it leads her to believe she's ugly in a sense. And Koito quickly establishes not as a character for Ai to save to drive the plot itself, but as someone to care for, because as it shows, Koito gave Ai genuine kindness and befriended her, but she did more than befriend her. She made Ai feel loved. As Ai looks down, she finds the girl she was tasked to protect being approached by the Wonder Killer, and she finds herself in the same helpless situation when her friend died, being forced to relive it again as the egg dies by the see no evils and the Wonder Killer as she breaks down helpless. Is what you think, I'd say. The Wonder Egg tells her, "My name is Kurumi Saijo. Don't forget me." And she disappears. This moment stuck with me because I know, and possibly the audience, won't remember much of her or so much as her name. Because even though she left a memorable impression on us and have some pretty good screen time with I, we probably won't remember her much in the long term. Characters come and go, some leaving more of a lasting impression than others. Depending on what they do, it can give us specific impressions.
Cock-a-doodle-doo! The cow says moo! Cock-a-doodle-doo! The cow says moo!
Like just Crazy Steve just being here and doing whatever he does kind of gives us a lasting impression of him, as his shenanigans made him pretty memorable. However, another factor of how our impressions are influenced by the story is exposure. Depending on how much screen time they get, they will also give us a more memorable impression on them in the long run. Or Katja from She-Ra. Like, until then, I've never really heard of She-Ra or Princess of the Power or the 80s version of it until I looked up Katja. And after I learned how much screen time she had, her beliefs, what she did, it kind of like not just only left impressions on the audience, but also for non-audiences, and also expanding its reach and also giving us more audiences and viewership. But what about Kurumi Saijo? Yes, she's somewhat memorable in this episode, and she made some impressions. I probably figured that she'll be memorable, but I doubt we'll ever remember her name. The mysterious voice then tells her that Kurumi Saijo is not the only egg that needs help. There are other eggs in their system that needs help, and I needs to help them overcome their trauma. And the more eggs she help, the more likely her friend will be revived.
少し暖かい。くるみちゃんを守ったから。ねえ、もっともっと守ったら、小糸ちゃんは生き返るの？そうなんだね。わからないんです。もしかして夜抜け出してどこかで事件に。
しっかりしてください。
小糸ちゃん。
Anyway.
Now, before I go to the next episode, I wanted to share a theory. I recently rewatched the first episode and thought that the egg sort of like died because she was being bullied. However, after rewatch, I noticed this. It made me think, why would it say that? If she was bullied, wouldn't it say like, please don't stop? Why? And that thing's face was censored, as if Sumori can't see her face, or if Sumori does not want to see her face. But that's just a theory of mine. Carrying on. Episode 2. We are introduced to Nero, who, in my opinion, seems very stoic and logical. She's the type of character who hasn't really stuck with me yet, but I think over time she might be a character that seems memorable in her own right, and somewhat that sort of like a contrast with Ai's personality. Ai being somewhat happy and interested in the situation, while Neru interprets it as just a thing she needs to do. Now, it seems ironic because we know who she is fighting for, but it may be interpreted as a double meaning. But she fails to see if she has any other motives. People will tend to do good things as a means to an end. It reminded me of dialogue from Puella Magi Magica Magica, a show focusing less on fighting witches, but more on why we make wishes, and why we make wishes to a means of an end, more on what we actually want. We already established, or hopefully established, that Ai is wanting to revive her friend out of goodwill. However, in Puella Magi Magica Magica, there was one thing that reminded me of this episode, when Mommy asked the girls, Do you want to make your wish out of goodwill alone or for yourself? Both are the same but are different to the core. And I think that's pretty much applied in this episode because we know Ai wants to do it for goodwill, however Neru establishes she wants to do it for herself. Why does she want to do it for herself? Well, I guess we'll have to figure it out as it goes on. When I ask Neru why she wants to bring back her sister, Neru tells her,
私が死なせた。
aside from that, there really isn't much for me to say about this episode as it acts as an expositional rehash of the events of the prior episode. However, it does have some interesting elements to it.
エッグ割らなければなんちゅうことないわけでしょ。私は襲われないんだし。
Yes, and this is one of them. There's a girl who was mentally abused by her gym teacher, and Ai essentially makes her believe in herself. However, she soon learns it's not enough. Initially, Ai believed if she makes the eggs find a problem within themselves, she succeeds. However, it's more difficult than that. She has to fight and take down the Wonder Killer, or manifestation of the problem, to succeed. I thought it's an interesting idea and adds further incentive to Ai's journey to actually not just acknowledge her problems, but also to identify and also face them head on. And when we do meet this Wonder Killer,
holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that, Private Pile?
and yeah, Ai gets thrown like a rag doll. And as Ai sees the Wonder Killer take Minami away, she remembers some of the low moments of her relationship with Koido. When Koido and Ai became friends, most of the bullying turned on Koido, as many of them ripped her gym clothes, classic harassment, and while this happened, Ai was scared and was helpless to do anything to help Koido, but only offer her emotional support. And for the first time in her life, Ai had to do the most difficult thing in her life. Ai had to save her, and to do so, she had to believe in herself. Because if she doesn't, then Minami dies, and if Minami dies, then she won't be strong enough to protect Koido. And I guess it gave me a tear in my eye and cemented her as one of my favorite characters, as she realizes she is afraid, but she can't let that fear hold her back. And Ai fights the Wonder Killer, wins, and the Wonder Killer blows up. And before Minami can disappear, she asks Ai what life would have been like if they met sooner. And Minami asks Ai if she will remember her. And before Ai can answer, Episode 3.
小糸さん、部活終わっ。
大戸さん。
Well,
Wait, that's not where I wanted to start. That's where I wanted to start.
手汗かいてる。切ったな。それにしても、こんなお花畑に囲まれて、私ならともかく。デブのあなたに似合わない。
And I found this episode interesting because... Okay, no, seriously. What exactly are you? Oh, and I forgot to mention about the Akas. And honestly, I can't say much about them. All I can say is that they sort of drive the plot for now, and they look strange. Oh, and they're the ones that created the eggs because of reasons. Anyways, we meet another character, Rika Kwai. If I were to describe her lightly, she's a total major absolute But, I mean, she could be worse.
お願い絶対返すからごめんまた忘れちゃった
Never mind, she's actually the worst. She also mentions she is a former idol who retired and gets by with some of her friends who lend her money. So please don't learn from her kids. And this.
興味ない残念ほっキュイおま私はうんカモシカのような足ねバックダンサーどうバック
And the reason she, or so she states, acts the way she does is because of her father. Because when she was young, her father told her these words: "A beautiful woman needs a beautiful wallet," or so she states. And she wants to revive her friend Shiemi so she can get more money from her because she was one of her major sources of income. And yeah, I can probably continue ranting about why I don't like her, but then again, this ain't about her. Or actually, this ain't about her completely. But despite her shortcomings, she seems like an interesting character. I continue to appreciate the writer's show don't tell philosophy. I was so distracted of highlighting all of her bad points that I almost missed the very subtle moments the show wanted me to notice. But how it relates to the long run? I'm not so sure, but continuing, it made me realize how grossly I misunderstood her. When I just saw her as a mean girl stereotype, Shinji somehow adds more layer to a character that could have been simply overlooked. And thinking back, a lot of these moments can be overlooked through a first viewing. But anyways, and I wakes up in Rika's dream?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer? でもどうして私の夢じゃないの
思いの強い方に引っ張られるんだよ。How?
It got me a little confused because what actually constitutes Rika's emotion stronger than I's? I mean, both have people that they want to bring back to life, and yeah, I get it, Rika's motivations seem at odds with I's, but then again, what else do we not know about I's motivations? The eggs they have to protect turns out killed themselves because they adored an idol when she killed herself. So essentially it's just idol killed herself, therefore her two respective fans killed themselves. Yeah, so not really interesting. Anyways, they fight, they get overwhelmed, and they have to hide in the lighthouse. I notices Rika's cuts and allowed Rika and I to both have a one-on-one talk with each other. Chiemi was a very close fan to Rika who attended all of her handshake events. She goes as far to give all the money she had to Rika just to see her, and Rika believed she had a rich friend, one who would put value on her. Until Rika found out she was stealing and selling the stolen items for money. Rika wanted her to stop and told her she would never associate with disgusting people like her and to never come back. It wasn't long after that she had to attend Chiemi's funeral, as she starved herself in her own home. And thinking back, I don't think Rika held any disgust or pity against Chiemi, but regret. I believe she only wanted her to stop because seeing her stoop so low hurt her. I think she believed she was enabling Chiemi in a way and her toxic behavior. So her death is her responsibility. I mean, but despite how Rika acts and what she says about Chiemi, it made me think, if Rika thought of Chiemi as just another wallet, then why go through all this mess just to bring her back? I mean, wouldn't it just be easier to just, I don't know, get another person to lend her money? I mean, thinking back, it just made me think that maybe Rika inside her just really cares about Jamie in some way, that she feels responsible for her death, that she feels Rika herself is the reason Jamie died, and through that gives her regret. It also made me consider, why were Rika's emotions to revive Jamie stronger than Ai's feelings to revive Koido? Maybe I didn't love Koido that much.
私も心のどこかで恨んでいたんだ。友達なのにどうして相談してくれなかったのかって。
But what was there for Ai to resent about Koido? We know that Koido has been genuinely kind to her and has been with her for most of the time. However, if we think back to the last scene in episode 3, Koido was kind to her. She gave her support. She loved her, so I asked myself, did I give any love to her back? Oh, and I almost forgot. And Rika gets,
Well, he's dead.
Episode 4. Now, before I begin this episode, let's talk about dialogue. No, really, let's talk about dialogue. I mentioned before how I appreciated the show's animation quality and soundtrack, yet I noticed I don't talk about another factor or another strength of the show. It's dialogue. In filmmaking, a golden rule in creating dialogue is to keep the dialogue short and to show what you want to show. It's a good rule, but it does have its drawbacks. Too little dialogue may leave audiences confused without proper contextualization to specific events or characters, and may leave them more confused. However, too much dialogue and you run the risk of boring your audience, as if in a lecture. So the rule can go either way. However, what you should remember is that if you write dialogue, either short or long, it has to mean something in the long run. Let's take Samurai Cop, for example.
Hello.
Hi.
How is he? Do you think he'd be able to answer a few questions?
No way, his lips are burned.
So what, he'll never be able to talk again?
Oh, he'll talk again, but you just have to give him a couple of weeks. Next time, guys, catch him in one piece.
Thanks, nurse.
Do you like what you see?
I love what I see.
Would you like to touch what you see?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to go out with me?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to fuck me?
Bingo.
Well, then let's see what you've got. Doesn't interest me. Nothing there.
Nothing there? Just exactly what would interest you? Something the size of a jumbo jet?
Have you been circumcised?
Yeah, I have. Why?
Well, your doctor must have cut a big portion of it off.
No, he was a good doctor.
Good doctors make mistakes, too. That's why they buy insurance.
Hey, don't worry. I got enough. It's big.
So, what did we learn from this dialogue? I don't know, your guess is good as mine. Now, here's some dialogue from Wonder Egg Priority.
私、ミワです。ミワちゃんね。僕は桃。桃？まあ、なんとでも。じゃあ、桃太郎さん？じゃあ、それで。私、痴漢にあったんです。うん。毎日同じ人だったんですけど、あの日は勇気を出してその人の腕を掴んだんです。この人痴漢ですって。大丈夫だった？はい、すぐに周りの人が抑えてくれました。よかった。 でもなんで私って、私そんなに女の子らしい方じゃないのによくわかりません。
そうだね。
ないですよね。
そんなことないんじゃない？
あんた？でもそのおじさん、パパの会社の専務だったんです。パパはクビにされました。ママはなんでそのくらい我慢できなかったの？触られたってことは可愛いからってことじゃないって。私が可愛いから選ばれたんだって。
落ち着いて。君は全然悪くない。悪くないよね。
桃太郎さん、
大丈夫。僕が守るから。
ありがとう。
うん。
肩幅広いですね。
普通じゃない。
And I simply love this dialogue. It's simple, to the point, and memorable. I mean, I can go on with how great it is, or how with this simple dialogue alone, it can be expanded on into future stories or future writing. But sadly, we don't have time for that. We know from the dialogues that Mila's trauma is obviously tied to that event, and the Warner killer is obviously the manifestation of that event. We know that she blamed herself for stopping him, and we know that she tried to convince herself her molestation wasn't that bad, that if she stuck with it, she would maybe still be alive. And we know that the new character Momo obviously empathizes or maybe sympathizes with her, that it wasn't her fault. Most importantly, it meant something. Not just dialogue to drive the plot, but also to make us care about Miwa. And not just to care about Miwa, but to care what she's been through, and also how her situation and context relates to the long run of the show. Because you can write almost anything for dialogue. However, as I mentioned before, it needs to mean something to your show or to audiences. Because again, if the dialogue doesn't mean anything, then it's just meaningless words and just a visual. We know that Momoko struggles with her gender identity. It also introduces a good inner conflict within herself. That does she want to be loved as a guy, or does she want to be loved as a girl? And I can figure it out because it's probably related to how her statue becomes alive again. And we understand her gender conflicts is the thing that probably got her friend killed. Oh, and what happens next? Oh, right, the other fight. I get a new power-up thing, and Rika shows up at the last second, and they save the other two girls. Okay, good. The other girls befriend Momoko, they find out Momoko is a girl, and the episode ends. Okay, good, let's go to the next episode. No, wait. Okay, that wasn't a good take. Okay, what other things are there? Before we begin the next episode, I'd like to talk about a moment that I skimmed over because, well, it caused, unwanted attention to the director and writer. And I'm not going to defend the scene because yes, it is and was sexist and should have been handled better. But relating it to what the writer writes for the story to what he actually believes is somewhat of a huge misstep. In the interview, the director of the series, Shin Wakabayashi, initially wanted to add more context to the scene. The scene follows the Aka stating, "Boys and girls' suicides mean different things. Men are goal-oriented, women are emotion-oriented. Women are impulsive and easily influenced by others' voices. Some might be led astray by the temptation of death. This place exists for those who want to return children like that to life, so don't get hung up on gender." However, the director felt he didn't want to add too many explanations, and with the anime's tight schedule, part of it was initially cut. And again, I could go on about the anime industry and its many hardships, but I can continue on that later. Thinking back, it also reminded me a little bit of the Attack on Titan situation, when the creator of the story put some events within the story about the Holocaust, leading fans to believe he was or is anti-Semitic. I admit, anti-Semitism is a hard subject to cover and maybe it could have been handled better. But again, correlating to what he writes to what he believes is a huge misstep. I believe a writer has an obligation to write about the events so it can be known, and once we know the horrors of it, we can talk about it and come with its conclusions. I think it'd be more racist and anti-Semitic if the author hid the fact it happened rather than showing it, because if he didn't show it to them, then they won't understand how truly horrendous it was, have a warped view of reality remaining ignorant. The point is, yeah, the subject should have been handled better. However, don't always assume what the author or writer writes for the story is to what he or she actually believes. Not once did he say he was or is anti-Semitic. He even acknowledges that the Holocaust was and is a terrible event. And yeah, we should talk about it. And yeah, I could probably go on how Attack on Titan is misunderstood and how the manga is and about the horrors of what people can do to other people. But if I go on about that, then we'll be here for a really long time. All I'm saying is the dialogue should have been handled better. That's it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that turns out their friend Neru is pretty loaded. Anyways, episode 5.
チラ見迷った？うん。あ、これお土産。
I mean, it could have followed the typical Magical Girl route. Just fight a monster, defeat the monster, win, boom, everything ends. However, given that's nearly the halfway point, I'm glad they don't stick to this sort of writing. That they focus more on getting to know the characters than the actual Wonder Killers itself. And yeah, like, I had no idea that Rika doesn't like her mom, and her reasons seem pretty valid.
多分私生まれた時に母親の顔見てやべこいつ親になるより一生なでいたいタイプだどうしよう
Or the fact that Momo doesn't like to be confessed by other girls, which I think is an interesting problem for her because, well, it happens to her a lot. While her friend Haruka was willing to view her as a woman instead of just a guy, and I think Momo's indecisiveness, whether if she wants to be loved as a girl or a guy, led Haruka to be killed. And I love that a majority of this episode is just the girls hanging out. And I simply love moments like this because it shows that the main plot isn't the main driving force for the entire series. It's knowing how to understand them and to understand that they're not just teenagers who just want to bring their friends back to life, but they're also human. There was one thing Rika asked her friends that actually caught my attention and was also surprised that it came from her.
もうやめね。
Well
考えてみればちえみのやつは勝手に死んだんだ。そりゃ確かに原因は私かもしれない。でも死ぬのなんて反則だし、そこまで責任感じる必要ある？本気。だってそうじゃない？
And I thought this was a brilliant point brought up by the show because so far they've been fighting for their friends, however, they don't consider if their friends even want to go back to life. And if they did, how it would affect them in the long run. It reminded me a bit of Puella Magi Magica Magica, in which a lot of girls make wishes, however when they do make wishes, they fail to consider if their wish is a means to end to their desire, or if it's a desire in themselves. Or in that one episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, when Polnareff makes a wish to resurrect his sister and Abdul, he nearly gets eaten alive, both metaphorically and quite literally. Because Polnareff never considered if they wanted to come back to life, or if he was doing it for goodwill, or for himself. But mainly in his case, he did it for himself. And The other part I found interesting is that Neru somewhat agrees with Rika, because to her, Neru knows why she is doing it, not because she loves her sister wholeheartedly, but she wants to know once and for all, why did her sister stab her? Because every day that she is alive, the scar serves as a reminder of that painful day over, and over again.
ねえ、あなたトリートメントしてる？ちょっと髪が傷んでるようだけど、勝手に触れないで。
This scene right over here gave me chills at the back of my spine. Because compared to all the other Wonder Eggs, yes, they did commit suicide. However, they seem to regret that they did. However, this one seems to continue to tempt Neru that she should kill herself.
やがては劣化する。うちのママなんか豚よ。いくら脂肪吸引してもヒアルロン酸でごまかしても劣化なんか止まらない。というより止めようとする行為自体が醜いったらありゃしない。あなたも綺麗じゃない。なぜ死なないの？なぜ一番美しいその時に死なずに意味のない生を周回ね。どうやって倒せば？ねえ、どうして死なないの？どうして？ねえ。
Well.
And as Neru continues to fight the Wonder Killer, you kind of have a sense that the Wonder Killer itself isn't the real problem, but something else. Neru realizes who the real Wonder Killer is.
How? 別にただあなたにムカついたの。本当は後悔してるんでしょ。だってもう誰も綺麗だって言ってくれないから。
And the Wonder Killer turns out to be the egg Neru was designated to protect. And I thought it was interesting both in a thematic and visual sense because it shows that girls have trauma and the sources of the trauma are not only dependent on others but also within themselves. And it also got me thinking about another thing. The girl talked about societal standards and how those standards define her. And made me think, who is Neru?
なぜ死なないのか。私を死に誘惑したのね。
Episode 6.
落ち着いて聞いてね。ママたち、お付き合いしようかと思うんだけど。
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Now, we got a new enemy type here. The haters. No, not those ones. Those ones. And they are given these jewels to help deal with the haters. And no, they are definitely not a rip-off of a franchise that we all know of, I think. Say Senata was able to see dead people and ghosts. She tried to tell her family, friends, anyone who was willing to listen to her, but they never believed her. As a result, her family sent her to a mental facility. When she got here, it got worse as their resentment, their hatred toward her grew. And all of that was too much for her, and she decided to take her own life. And I received some news. And I is understandably upset. Now, you might be thinking she might be upset because, well, Sawaki is her teacher, and yeah, he may have had something to do with Koto's death. However, it's more because, or more, what I believe is that Ai is afraid that she will lose the love of her mom. And I know she just got new friends, but I guess losing her mom will just hurt her more. Neru tells Ai that her problem is simple.
愛も先生が好き。
When I first saw this, I was like, yeah, no. And I don't think she does. I mentioned I avoid talking too much about him because I don't know too much about the relationship, aside from the scenes we were given, and the whole I like Sawaki seems pretty rushed. Or maybe I was more afraid of Koido loving Sawaki, and if Koido gave love to him, I will feel jealous, and now her mom loving Sawaki will make things worse because that love from her mom will be taken from her. However, upon writing this, I asked myself another question. Because given that we know that Ai is given care, love from her friends, family, it made me consider if I ever gave any of that love back to Koido. Ai grabs the bracelets and finally sees the Wonder Killer, the girl's trauma, and defeats it. And there was one thing she told to the egg before she disappeared.
こんな化け物たち、たった一人で信じてくれるの？もちろん。君が好き。
And that was an issue or a conflict she would never have figured it out without Neru and her other friends. And I simply loved this moment because it was motivated by character. It contrasts perfectly with Ai's struggle to share, if not identify her problems, but her fears and concerns of not only Neru, but her friends. She used to be afraid of facing things head on and didn't know when to believe herself, but now that she has people who potentially care and love her, I'm kind of excited what's going to happen next in this series.
私、学校行きます。
So, there you have it. My first video on the first half of Wonder Egg Priority. Do I like it? Yeah, it's kind of great. There were some things that didn't work, but it didn't completely ruin my experience. Honestly, I can see the appeal of the show with its animation and direction, though it did suffer in the end, but it's not saying there were other outside factors that contributed to that, but till next time. Stay tuned for my next episode where I cover episodes 7 through 12, where I review and analyze Nojima's horrifying, traumatizing, and wonderful Wonder Egg Priority.